Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to our last session of what I hope for you has been a really interesting and thought-provoking day. My name's Martin Tugwell. I'm Chief Executive of Transport for the North. This next session is entitled around the need for change and the need for pace. We've heard a lot this day today in the various plenary sessions and also in the workshop sessions. We've heard a lot about how we need to do things differently, how we need to react, and we need to make a change happen. And so I'm really pleased that we've been joined for this last session by Ian Stewart MP, the MP for Milton Keynes South. He's been the MP for nearly 13 years now. 2010, I think, Ian, you became the MP. And in today's session, most interestingly, he's also the chair of the Transport Select Committee. So I'll invite Ian to come and have a bit of an opportunity to say a few words, and then we'll have a conversation involving himself and Andy Rind. So can you please welcome Ian Stewart?
Thank you very much, Martin, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be able to join you here this afternoon. What I thought I would do in 5 minutes or so is just give you a brief overview of some of the work that we're doing in the Transport Select Committee at the minute. But before I do that, politicians always have a somewhat arrogant assumption that people know what all the parliamentary terminologies are. So for those of you who don't know what a select committee is, Parliament has a range of these committees which are set up roughly per government department, and they exist to scrutinise the work of that government department, of any agencies connected to it, and to the operators and providers within that area. So within transport, obviously we scrutinise the work of the Department for Transport, and agencies like National Highways, Network Rail, the Civil Aviation Authority, and all the other statutory bodies that come under the responsibility of the DFT, and then all the operators of transport services as well. And the traditional role of a select committee is to scrutinise the work. If there is a problem, to look into what's happened, who's at fault, where the problems have lain, and what the solutions to those might be. And that, of course, is a critically important part of our work, and we've certainly been kept busy in recent months with a range of different problems within the transport sector. A lot of them in rail, but not exclusively. One of the issues we'll be picking up shortly is what happened with the failures of the passport gates at airports and Eurostar at the half-term holidays, which I understand was down to a tech glitch, but they decided to do the upgrade of the software a couple of days before one of the busiest travel days of the year. So therein lies a lesson. So while it's important that we do that scrutiny work, what I've also been keen to do is make the committee more of a forward-looking, horizon scanning body to try and identify some of the upcoming issues that we ought to be aware of, and also to try and look at the transport world more holistically, both in itself and how it fits in to government, other government areas. So to that end, we have a couple of inquiries, one running, one coming up in the second part of this year, which I'd just like to touch upon. The first one we did is called Our Future Transport, and we invited a whole range of individuals and organisations initially to submit a written pitch to us with what they saw as the disruptors that could be coming down the line in the world of transport that we ought to start thinking about. It's a sort of inquiry, if we had run it maybe 15 years ago, some would have said, you know, drones are coming, self-driving vehicles are coming, you need to start thinking about how you're going to plan for that. So we had over 200 submissions written to us, and then just after Easter, we invited a short list of a dozen, and Martin was one of them, to come and pitch to us in person. It was a bit, I suppose the initial thought I had, it was a bit like Dragon's Den, where you would come and do a pitch and then be subjected to some questioning. Which dragon I most closely resembled, I leave that to others to decide. But in the event, I think it sounded more like Mastermind as I ran the event and invited people to come up and state their name and specialist subject. Anyway, we haven't quite finished that part of it yet. We're still reviewing the different pitches, but we had some really interesting submissions to us. For example, there were a number of submissions on the use of data, about how that can predict not just passenger flows, but where there might be problems on the road or rail network, how you can monitor usage, and that can help planning. That, of course, then brings in questions about privacy and a whole range of other matters. So there were a whole range of inquiries that we potentially could do, and we're just taking a little time to decide which ones. But it's looking at those future disruptors, where they might be, and to start doing that thinking about what preparations need to be made. The second area where I've had agreement in principle from my colleagues on the committee to do is a much more holistic strategic transport inquiry. And that's looking not just at a particular area of transport. It's very easy for us to do a rail inquiry, a maritime inquiry, a bus inquiry, so on and so forth. All those are incredibly important. But I think we sometimes miss looking at transport in the round. How do we appraise investments in transport? So not just look at the narrow benefit-cost ratio of a project. In the transport world, it costs X pounds to build, will generate Y revenue, and you make a decision on that basis. But how it links into housing, into wider economic growth, into environmental benefits, in access to education, a whole range of different parameters. How can we better assess that? How do we look at transport planning within other government departments? My years in Parliament and a few years as a minister taught me that, yes, minister is still very much alive. The tendency to think in silos is ever present. And transport is one of these areas that cuts across so many different government departments. So I want to look at how, if you are making a decision on investing in a new railway line, well, what are the potentials for, putting in data cables at the same time? How do you link it into an industrial strategy? All these wider implications. The spark for that thinking, for me, came in my time as a minister in the Scotland office, which is a role I held before becoming chair of the Select Committee. And I had an overseas visit to the Faroe Islands. Which is a wonderful place. If you've never been, I strongly urge you to go. I'm not on commission from the Faroe Islands Tourist Department, but it's an archipelago of 17 islands or so, and they have a fleet of ferries that links them all together. And about 10 years ago, they realized they would have to procure some new ferries to replace the life-expiring ones. And then someone said, actually, we could do it differently. We could build a series of tunnels to connect the main islands with some of the outlying ones. And if you looked at it on a pure BCR basis, you would probably not have done it. Over 2 or 3 cycles of ferry procurement, it might have broken even, but probably not. But if you add in the wider benefits of it, by building these tunnels, and they are something to behold, and they have actually, for someone from Milton Keynes, this is quite special, the world's first subsea roundabout. If there's anyone from the Milton Keynes Roads Department here, don't get any ideas. But what they have achieved by cutting the journey times from between all the islands, they've stopped depopulation from the remoter islands and actually reversed it. They've increased access to employment, to education, to healthcare. Because they've got a large number of electric vehicles, the pollution is much lower than what was emitted from the ferries. So if you appraise all that on the wider basis, it was a no-brainer, and that's what they've done, and they're building even more of them. And it's all financed. Because there was a long-term certainty, they've been able to raise the money to make it viable. So it's looking at projects on that basis I want to do more work on. And then look at the relationship between what central government should do, what the devolved administrations should do on a regional basis, what individual cities and local authorities should do. Because I sometimes think we lose that part of the equation, and there's always a tendency for central government to try and control everything, which rarely, whichever political stripe you are, is a good thing. So I want to look at all these different elements in this strategic inquiry, and I know that the work that the STBs do will be, I think, very influential in shaping our thinking. And hopefully all this, when you piece it together, will give some greater long-term certainty for the transport sector, which is what is required to unlock both public and private investment and deliver the transport infrastructure and services that we all want to see and deserve. So I hope that's helpful in setting the scene of the work that we're currently doing as a committee, and I look forward to the discussion from here. Thank you very much.
If you'd care to join me. Andy, if you'd care to join me as well. Thank you for that, Ian. It was, it sounds quite an exciting time for the Transport Select Committee in looking at some of these linkages, which has been very much a theme today. It's not just transport for the sake of transport, but for a purpose. Is that one of the things that you're really wanting to push?
Absolutely, and it's also not just the passenger side of it, as important as that is. It's how freight fits into the equation as well. Transport is one of these subjects that when it's all working fine, it doesn't hit the headlines, but it doesn't take long for something to go wrong and people to notice that if a particular good they want to buy isn't on the shelf, or the petrol stations run out of supplies, or they can't get to where they want to go, very quickly it becomes a hot topic. So it's looking at all these issues in the round, I think is very much part of what we have to do.
And of course we saw that very much with the pandemic, where whilst people might have changed their behaviours, we still wanted to see the toilet rolls in the shops. We still needed to get goods and materials to factories and offices as well. So that freight side is really particularly quite important, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And Andy, in terms of some of the stuff we're talking about today, you know, this freight has come up a number of times, and we often talk about transport being focused on the economy and improving the economy. That kind of suggests we should do even more, I guess.
It does, and I mean, the term freight blindness has been used a bit today, and I as somebody who worked on freight in the early part of my career, I can identify with that. You know, there is a focus on passenger movement, but it is equally, if not more so important, and the demands of the consumer are so great now for just-in-time click and deliver that I think it's really important.
One thing that's come up, you mentioned about the Dragon's Den, and it was certainly a different experience being before the committee on that day. But one thing that somebody's picked up on is the fact that it was just literally people presenting to the committee for 5 or 10 minutes, and then you asking questions. And maybe is there something to learn there? Because we've got a very technical profession, and yet, actually, it's about making decisions. And sometimes, do we make too much about the technical and not enough about the political decisions that we need to bear in mind?
That's a really good question. I think effective decision-making has to have both. You know, when you're making the decisions in a political or governance sense, you need to understand what the reality is. If you make decision X, this will happen. And often in politics, it's not the immediate consequences, it's the move 4 or 5 on that you have to think through. So I always liken politics and government to playing chess. You think ahead 3, 4, 5 moves, what it means. And that sometimes means you don't take the immediately obvious answer. and you have to balance all the different points together. But you can't make those decisions without being grounded in the simple facts and reality of what's happening.
And is that something perhaps as a profession we need to get a bit better at being able to understand how we present our information to yourself and other decision makers? Because sometimes from a technical perspective, it seems obvious to do that. It's obvious, but it comes up against the how do you convince the population, how do you take people with you, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, politicians, by and large, are generalists. We have some knowledge, but we need to have that interaction with different sectors to get a full understanding of how something operates. And there are some fantastic schemes available. When I first came into Parliament, I did a fellowship with the Industry and Parliament Trust, which organises over a year a number of days, effectively work experience. I did mine in the rail industry and got to see everything from how the catering services are organised to the signal boxes to the civil engineering repair work. So understanding exactly what's involved is really important for MPs. And the Industry and Parliament Trust, that's just one example. I know there are lots of other schemes available. So I would encourage anyone, politicians, we don't all bite, do speak to us because we are interested in really learning how something operates so that they can then influence our decisions.
And Andy, Ian in his opening remarks there talked about needing to think about some of the bigger, broader linkages. I know this morning you touched on a little bit about the LTP guidance that's going to be coming. And we've also explored today quite a bit of the work that the STBs are doing. Is these wider linkages, are those things that you would encourage us to be thinking about as well?
Absolutely. And I was fascinated to hear Ian's description of the inquiry that you're about to put in train about looking at transport in terms of the other things it delivers. I'm not sure I share your optimism that it can be joined up at governmental level. I've been around long enough to see that tried a number of times, and it's really hard to do at national level. I think it can be done at regional level, and it is being done at regional level, and I think you will find some interesting evidence from Martin and colleagues when you launch that. But absolutely, it does go back to transport it's an enabler of other activity, be that economic activity, be it levelling up, be it, placemaking. Absolutely is.
A number of the comments coming through, Ian, have talked about touching on a theme that perhaps we forget sometimes, that we often talk as a profession about how the evidence can lead us. And we know that the average journey length is actually quite small in comparison. And so are we doing enough to promote walking, cycling, active travel, community transport? Is there more that we could be doing there?
I think the answer is yes, and it's very, when I took over the chairmanship of the role, I've been very careful not to make it the Railway Select Committee. And I'm a huge train buff, so yes, that's where my heart lies. I'm not going to deny that. But it's every bit of transport from last mile deliveries to active travel. So we've done some work on the regulation of e-scooters, for example, of which Milton Keynes, which pioneers the world in everything, of course, is one of the test areas. So yes, it's everything from that to the big international connections, and that's part of what I hope to do, is looking at everything in the round. And actually, just to pick up, and in your point, I don't think central government can do everything. And that's where I think there is the role for, and looking at how the different spheres and layers of government work together. Yeah. I see the role for central government as sort of setting the big strategic objectives, the legislative frameworks, but then allowing each area to say, well, you should be the ones who work out what that means in the West Midlands or wherever it is to deliver that in your area. Obviously, central government too has a role in coordinating it all, because there will be the strategic national corridors that you need to prioritise as well as the regional and local solutions. So someone's got to take an overview of the broad network. But within that, there's much more that could be done away from central government.
So it sounds, Andy, is very much we're moving towards transport for the economy,
Yep.
for the environment, and for society. Would that be a fair focus, do you think, moving forward?
I think that's right, and I think really understanding what users want. And you heard the Minister this morning talk about choice. And I think Ian's right. You know, I remember starting my career as a young transport planner, and somebody saying, "Well, what's the golden, what's the golden bullet for getting people out of cars?" And it's kind of, well, actually, it's lots of individual things. It's a bit of homework, and it's a bit of delivery. It's a bit of active travel. It's a bit of demand responsive transport. It's lots of different things, and that does depend on the topography and the geography and the makeup of the area. And government doesn't know that stuff with the best will in the world.
I know, Ian, you're on quite a tight time because you need to get back to London this evening. But the one specific question I will ask you, because it's come up top of the poll, not surprising because it was mentioned earlier this morning in the session, road user charging. The committee did a very good inquiry into that. It published its response. You've had government's response to date on that. As a committee, do you think there's more that should be done, could be done here?
Yes, well, we have had technically a government response, but it was a non-response because they basically said we don't have a policy in this, therefore we're not answering any of your comments and recommendations, which I think is rather short-sighted because doing nothing is increasingly not going to be an option. If you look at the transition from petrol and diesel vehicles to electric ones, if nothing happens, there will be a large black hole in the nation's finances. I've seen various estimates, but somewhere between 20 and 40 billion pounds per annum. That is a vast sum of money that has to be replaced somehow, unless there's going to be significant public spending cuts, and I don't see people queuing up for those. So what the committee recommended was that we set up an independent commission to look at all the options. There's no one single road user pricing scheme. There's a number of ways you could do it. And so that the next government, whichever colour that is, can then take forward the range of recommendations that body would make and start to introduce it. I fear we're in the position now, we've got a general election within the next 18 months, it's going to get parked in the too difficult, too controversial box, and we're probably going to lose a year or two where some useful work could be done on what potentially could replace this funding.
But it also sounds to me like there's an opportunity there, particularly for regional strategic bodies, if there's an ability to think about some of these issues so that we can have some options available for, as you say, a government of whichever colour after the next general election. I know, Ian, you are tight for time, so there are some other questions there around the rural aspects of life, which we've explored today. But before you leave us, is there one last message you'd like to leave us with today?
Well, it's been a fascinating conversation. I'd love to be able to continue it more. When we do launch these inquiries, there's some well-known faces in the room, but lots of people with expertise and knowledge. So please do, when you see the Select Committee launch an inquiry, do submit evidence. Initially, it's done through a written format, and then we do evidence sessions in public. We invite a cross-section of witnesses to come and speak to us. But it goes back to your question, Martin. Let us know, engage with us, so that we can make as best informed decisions as we can.
And on that note, Ian, we'll call it time because I know, as I said, you need to get back. Andy, also thank you for joining us this afternoon and also for all the input you've had throughout the day and beforehand. So can I ask you to say thank you to Ian and Andy?
Thank you. Thank you.